Staff of Kings, the last initial Indiana Jones game, if you don't count the LEGO games or the fan games. Now, granted, this game has a pretty mixed reception with critics and fans alike, which is understandable for being a person that owns all 4 versions of the game and has played them numerous times. If you ever wondered what version is good or bad, I can answer that question for you. Now take in mind that each version of the game I'm rating from 1 to 10. Something rated a 4 or lower is considered bad. Something that is rated a 5 is just average. It's not bad, but it's not good either. Something that's rated 6 or higher is considered good for the most part. With that being said, this is every version of Staff of Kings reviewed and ranked from worst to best. Let's start off with the most infamous version of the game, the Wii version. Most people who call this game bad are probably the unlucky ones who ended up playing this version. Frankly, I don't blame you for disliking this version, because I didn't like it either. When I first played this version, I didn't run into that many issues, but when I replayed it, it's way worse than I remember it being. The main reasons why I believe this is the worst version of the game are tacky controls, bugs, and permanent glitches that literally happen every time. I wish I was kidding. I mean, look at the state of San Francisco Chinatown.
Your friend is upstairs. Hurry, if you wish to save her. No excuses! If we don't find that jade sphere, we are all dead. Maybe the boss was wrong. I tell him you said that. Shut up and keep looking. Come on, get him!
If you thought that was bad, look at Nepal. And it only gets worse from here. From what I've noticed, there have been several instances of frame cutouts happening during cutscenes, the game freezing for half a second or longer when you reach checkpoints at times, voice and music audio not playing correctly, and extended cutscenes that aren't necessary. Yet again, this is only half of the reason why this version sucks. The other reason being the controls. Now, if you're playing the game normally with a Wii Remote and Nunchuck, the controls only register like 50% of your actions, which isn't reliable, but lucky for you, from what I've tested to make the controls respond better, this was my best result. Have a standard Wii Remote with a strap, but without the jacket, connect a Wii Motion Plus to the remote, and finally connect the nunchuck to the remote. And bam, this is the best way to play the game from what I've tested. With the Motion Plus connected, I would say the controls now respond about 85% of the time, which is better than before. Overall though, responsive controls or not, this game is broken, glitchy, and just not worth playing. Also, may I remind you that the copy I have was brand new and completely sealed when I bought it, telling me whether it's used or not, it's still broken. Plus, the bonus content you get for beating the game is honestly not worth it. The battle arena is just a waste of time, the co-op play level is literally just 5 stages with picture animated cutscenes, which basically implies that this was a last second decision. Heck, the Fate of Atlantis port I don't think is enough to save this version, because this port wasn't even very good either. The music is too quiet, while the voice acting is too loud. Plus, the hand icon you use to interact is not ideal for the game at all, mainly because in certain situations, Like when you're fighting enemies or going through certain areas, the hand icon is way too distracting compared to the other icon you see on the PC. Like this icon just is way too distracting, and it's not ideal for this at all. It goes without saying, if you want to play Fate of Atlantis, get the Steam version. So yeah, there's no point spending $15 to $30 for a broken game and a lame port of a good game. At the end of the day, the Wii version gets a 4.5 out of 10. A game that could have been decent, but instead was a broken game not worth playing. My advice, avoid this version at all costs. Following that catastrophe would be the next Nintendo port, aka the DS version. Either know this version of the game would turn off some fans because of pixelated visuals, stylish controls, and recycled Raiders and Doom music being played in the background of the game. Yet overall, if you can get past that, this is a pretty fun handheld game to play whenever you have free time during your busy days. Personally, I would recommend you play this on a 3DS or a 2DS, mainly because the game was intended for players to aim with their stylus to move around. In other words, the movement in the game is programmed to move in a complete 360 angle. Unlike Mario 64 on the DS, this game allows clear-cut turns without any animation cuts. But with a slow but smooth running animation, the stylus controls work the way they're intended, and when done properly, it can be enjoyable to use. But of course, the main core of gameplay is the combat and traversal. Indy's moveset of attacks is uppercuts, left and right hooks, and a punch to the gut. Every time you land a successful hit, your super meter increases. When a bar lights on fire, that means you can perform a finisher, but keep in mind that each bar is based on one enemy, meaning if you fill it to maximum, you can perform a finisher on 3 enemies at once. What's satisfying about these finishers? There's several versions of them to keep it entertaining. Plus, you can do this as a finisher. Now that's a finisher. Anyway, the traversal in the game is straightforward for the most part. You tap on the screen to climb ledges, ladders, jump over pits, and swing over pits. Be careful with the jumping though. My advice, make sure you go to a full stop before jumping. Never try to run and jump. Trust me, it does not work most of the time. Man, if you thought that was a mouthful, then get this. In the first 10 minutes of the game, you're forced to solve this puzzle that involves picking 3 specific paintings in a certain order. And you know what's the best part about this puzzle? It doesn't give you any clues on what the order is, let alone what it even means. You sadistic bastards! You expect us to guess? With 6 paintings total and you have to pick 3 in a specific order, that would mean you could try 18 different types of combinations. My God! Whose idea was this? Lucky for you, I'll tell you what the combination is so you don't have to waste countless minutes on this like how I did. The order is 2, 3, 6. And the puzzle will be solved. You can thank me later because if you thought that was an odd decision in game design, oh man, it gets better. By any chance, didn't you guys remember the cable car chase on the canceled next-gen version of the game? Well, apparently the DS is the only version that actually tried to replicate it. Unlike the other 2 versions that made the scene a shootout instead, this version perfectly replicates what the original developer's vision was on the cable car chase. Coming from A2M, that is surprising. After getting that through your head, the rest of the game is what you expect it to be. You fight Nazis, you solve puzzles, you collect artifacts, you dodge traps. And actually, speaking of that, there was this one puzzle in Nepal that was a major pain if you don't know what you're doing. Right before you get to the Staff of Moses, in the end of the cave, you need to solve this tile puzzle. It's almost like a guessing game if you aren't very observant, mainly because the tiles that break hardly look any different to the ones that don't. The only way to tell is if you look really closely at it and see if it's slightly more old. But if this is still a problem, then the answer to solving this is just, well, this. Start on the 5th tile, go forward once, then turn right, go forward twice, then turn right again, go forward once, then turn left, then go in this direction till you reach here, and finally you just move forward. Other than those puzzles, the rest of the game you can figure out yourself. All in all, this version's okay. It's not below average, or just average. It's okay for a DS game, which is why I give this version a 6 out of 10. Decent, but I've played better. Now that we've gone through Nintendo's versions, let's take a look at Sony's versions of the game. And surprisingly, these versions were actually good. Coming up next is the PlayStation 2 version of the game. This is the version I've played the most since it was the first one that I owned and grew up playing. It's a port of the Wii version, but if you ask me, it's an improvement in almost every way. This version got everything right that the Wii version got wrong. The PS2 version has better graphics, better controls, better performance, better loading screens, and even a better disc. Honestly, have you looked at the disc of the Wii version?
What the hell is this?
It looks like the disc cover of the game wasn't even finished either. It looks like an absolute embarrassment. If you look at the PS2 disc, it is fully finished, and it looks the way it's supposed to with the full colorized look of what you expect. Man, it's impressive that a previous gen console did the game justice rather than the next gen console. But other than the functionality of the game, this version is actually very fun with its simplistic controls and immersive music. Plus, a lot of moments that were an absolute pain on the Wii version were fixed in the PS2 version, like QuickTime events. During these scenes, instead of shaking your Wii remote and nunchuck like crazy, all you have to do is press L1 and R1, which is a lot easier and less awkward to use. When punching enemies, all you have to do is press the X button instead of swinging your arm around like crazy. These changes just give more reasons to why the PS2 did it better. If you're wondering if this version has any glitches, well, there's nothing game-breaking, I'll say that. The only ones I've seen are animation cuts, rare instances of crashing, and this one window that doesn't play the sound effects sometimes. Nothing that ruins the game for the most part. These kind of glitches you'll find in any game, so nothing to worry about when it comes to the functions and the way it's supposed to run. You know, one thing I've really noticed that kind of just sucks about both of the console versions of the game is, where's Indy's satchel bag? You know, the thing around his waist? Where is that? Like, the thing you always see him wearing in the movies. The thing that carries all his items? Why is that completely non-existent here? Did A2N purposely leave that out? Because of those picture-animated cutscenes you see in the Wii version, something's telling me that was intentional. Why would they leave out a main part of his design? That's like if you took a Spider-Man design and removed the logos. That does not look right. Why is this satchel bag missing? This is one of the main reasons why I don't believe this is the best version of the game, because he's missing one of his key designs on his outfit. That just isn't right. Overall, this is the console version of Staff of Kings I would recommend to anyone who's willing to pick it up. Which is why I give the PS2 version a 7 out of 10. Really good for a PS2 game. Had a lot of fun with this one. And finally, let's get to the overall best version of the game. The PlayStation Portable version. Out of the 4 versions of Staff of Kings, the PSP is without a doubt the definitive version of the game. After sinking literally hours into A2M's okay but mediocre ports of the game, Amaze Entertainment did something that the other versions could never do. They made a great game that's worth talking about. The PS2 port, I will admit, is really good, but nothing special worth talking about when it comes to what the average game expectation is. I cannot stress enough that this is the version you guys should be playing. I will admit, it's not perfect like the other indie game we all know, but I will say this is a worthy successor to it. Through my entire experience playing Indiana Jones games, this is the second best experience I've played so far. I mean, where do I even begin? The story is well paced, the characters are more fleshed out, things that weren't explained in the other versions are explained here. The writing is better, the music is better, and the gameplay is outstanding for a handheld device. From what I've noticed, the PSP version is the closest thing we have to the next-gen version we never got. From what the storyboards tell us, the gameplay and level design choices are very heavily inspired by the LucasArts version of the game. To the combat, to the environment, to the puzzles, to the platforming, to what everything Amaze Entertainment could have done with the game, they decided to take inspiration from the definitive version instead of doing its own thing like what A2M did. At the end of the day, the PSP did everything the game was supposed to be initially, which is why I give it a rating of a 8 out of 10. An absolute blast for a handheld device. And that was Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings. An overall good Indiana Jones game for the most part, with 2/4 being okay, while the other half was great and mediocre. Yet again, there was one huge problem with the game. One, it's a mess of a story that you have to play both handheld versions of the game and one of the console releases to understand what happened in it. Which is why later on in the month, I will be explaining the full story of Staff of Kings in chronological order. Until then, I'd stay tuned, and as always, see you guys.